In the summer of 1901, Lester Mangum was a 27-year-old Utah-born missionary laboring in Syria, then part of the church's Turkish mission. At the moment, Elder Mangum was the sole Latter-day Saint missionary in Aintab, one of the thriving branches in that mission. Elder Mangum was an experienced missionary with growing fluency in the Turkish language, learning to write the language in both Arabic script and in the Armenian alphabet. Indeed, the Latter-day Saints of the Aintab branch were all Armenians. In administering the affairs of the Aintab branch, Elder Mangum had the assistance of members who had been Latter-day Saints for years. In dealing with the surrounding culture, Elder Mangum had cultivated acquaintances among local officials of the Ottoman Empire. Despite being a Mormon minority within the Armenian minority within the Ottoman world, life was, for the time being, as stable as it ever would be during the course of Latter-day Saint missionary labors in the Turkish mission. But Elder Mangum's life was about to become much more complicated. Under the circumstances, he could not counsel with his Armenian branch members, and certainly not with his Turkish neighbors. Unable to contact his mission president, Elder Mangum confided his concerns to the president of the church's European mission in Liverpool, England, in a letter written in August 1901. A circumstance has arisen for which I have no sure precedent, and I refer the affair to you. A Muslim officer has asked for baptism. Of course, you are well enough acquainted with the affairs in this land to know that for a Muslim to openly declare a change of faith is almost equivalent to courting death. Realizing this, he asks for secret baptism and confirmation. Under the circumstances, is there any objection to baptizing the young officer as he wishes? This was a question that had never before arisen in the history of Latter-day Saint missionary work in the Middle East. The Turkish mission well illustrates the global reach of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It spanned the old Ottoman Empire, Turkey, Greece, Syria, Palestine. The mission was opened in 1884 at the request of an Armenian living in Constantinople. Its earliest missionaries were Latter-day Saints born in Switzerland, Hungary, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and the United States. Those who responded to the gospel message were chiefly Armenians, members of one of the world's oldest continuous Christian communities. The missionaries found a few converts among German settlers, and a few Arabs expressed interest. One elder was approached in 1889 by two Arabs who wanted to become Mormons, expressing the hope that the church would help them emigrate. The elder baptized them, but did not record their names or any further contact with them. By 1900, elders had established several small branches in Syria. The Aintab branch, now on the Turkish side of the Turkish-Syrian border, had a few dozen members led by Joseph W. Booth of Alpine in Utah. Elder Booth's companion was Lester Mangum, another young man of Utah County. He is the Mangum of BYU's Night Mangum Hall. In 1901, there arrived in Aintab a new member of the city council, a young man born in Constantinople, member of an upper-class family who had received an excellent education from the highest official institution of Constantinople as a civil engineer and surveyor. His name was Saim Abd al-Samid, generally called Saim Effendi, with Effendi being a Turkish title indicating Saim's place in Ottoman society. Given his social standing, education, and apparently secure financial situation, it is not surprising that Saim was a cosmopolitan young man who sought out the company of other interesting men, including English-speaking foreigners. Within a short time of his arrival at Aintab, Saim made the acquaintance of the Mormon missionaries. Saim called often at the mission headquarters and sometimes escorted the elders to places they could not have visited on their own. He assisted the elders with their language studies, and he answered their questions about local customs and Islam. Saim attended testimony meetings that spring, And once, when he happened to be at the mission home for a young people's meeting, he joined in to speak very interestingly on the social relations of the young people, Elder Booth recorded. This is a notable event for us, as it is probably the first speech ever made by a Muslim before a congregation of saints. One day, the conversation between Saim and Elders Booth and Mangum turned to the subject of tithing. Saim was intrigued by the idea and asked many questions. According to Elder Booth, Saim accepted the principle and expressed his desire to be numbered among the tithe payers. From that day, he paid tithing to the elders, but asked that his name not be recorded on the church's books. That could have caused him problems with his family and government. Soon after this development, and while Elder Booth was away, Saim asked for baptism, secret baptism. He told Elder Mangum that he wanted to emigrate to Utah, but in the meantime, baptism and confirmation would give him added strength and light. It was at this point that Elder Mangum wrote his letter to Francis M. Lyman, president of the European Mission in Liverpool. President Lyman's advice was simple. Let the young officer come to us in England and be baptized on his way to Zion if he does not wish to wait till he gets there. Writing to a friend in October, Elder Mangum reported, "There is also a young man of Constantinople that will leave at the earliest opportunity. If I could have the honor of baptizing the young man, and it were my only baptism while here, still I should count my labors far from being small. He is one of those whose faith is the moving principle in their lives, and his friendship is not lightly esteemed." But Saim Abd al-Samid would not wait. A report to Salt Lake authorities notes, the Aintab branch is also making headway. A Muslim engineer secretly got baptized into our faith. He will have to keep himself secret till ready to immigrate, otherwise his life might be taken. We proposed to him to get baptized when out of the country, but he was too anxious and would not wait. Saim was baptized on 19 November 1901 by Elder Mangum. A few days later, Elder Booth recorded the event in his diary after he'd received a letter. This is the first Muslim that has ever joined the church, to my knowledge. That baptism was reported in the Millennial Star in December, but the name of the new convert was not publicly recorded. To date, I have found Saim's name recorded in only one place, Elder Booth's diary. By April 1902, 4 months after his baptism, Saim's plans for emigration were complete. Unaware of Saim's intentions, several of the Armenian saints also made plans to emigrate that spring. Joseph W. Booth, who was returning to Utah at the end of that mission, purchased tickets for the Armenians to sail from Naples, Italy, the nearest port with regular passenger accommodations to New York. Saim purchased his own tickets with his own funds, separate from the Armenian travelers. Traveling on his own, Saim reached Naples and joined Elder Booth on April 28th. He and Elder Booth enjoyed a few hours together, strolling through a pleasant park just west of the city. Then the great blow came. Saim went to board his ship and presented himself for his medical inspection. Responsible shipping companies always employed physicians who gave passengers a cursory medical examination. This was to prevent contagion aboard ship, of course, but also to screen out passengers who might be rejected by American immigration officials as being unable to work to support themselves. To prevent the expense to shipping companies of having to return rejected immigrants to Europe, doctors tried to guess who would be rejected in New York and barred them from leaving Europe in the first place. The ship's doctor decided Saim was too great a risk because his eyes were red. There was no sign of trachoma, an infectious eye disease still responsible for much of the world's blindness. That disease was so carefully screened in New York, but Saim's eyes were reddened, perhaps by the weariness of travel, perhaps by the glare from the sea, who knows. but the doctor, looking out for his company's interests and unwilling to risk having to transport him back to Naples, refused to allow Saim to board. At dusk, Saim stood on the pier next to one of the would-be immigrating Armenian saints who had also been rejected, and watched as the ship pulled out of the Bay of Naples. "It is very sad for them," recorded Elder Booth. "They will not be able to go back to their own land without danger of imprisonment on landing. They had left illegally without exit visas. The only way I can see for them is to find a tramp steamer and come cheap to Liverpool, and from there get passage to Utah." Apostle Lyman in Liverpool watched for them, but finally reported that, "I have heard nothing from those unfortunate brethren left at Naples. I hope they will turn up and be able to get through some way. Not having their language, we shall be powerless to instruct them or to get them to understand anything. They would not dare to meet any of the Turks connected with the legation here." But they did not find a way to reach Liverpool or the United States. I do not yet know the details, but Saim did return to Turkey. He found work as a civil engineer in Tokat, a city far to the north of his old home in Aintab. He married and began to raise a family, first a daughter, then a son. As these children were born, Latter-day Saint missionaries, calling as old friends, not as religious leaders, secretly blessed the babies. In 1904, Elder Booth returned to Turkey on another mission and headed for Tokat. The very day he arrived there, he sent a card to our dear brother Saim, who was soon in my room and talking over past events. He invited me to his home, where I met his wife and 2 children. The father, a member of the church, all unknown to even our own Turkish saints, and to his wife. Saim kept in touch with Elder Booth by mail. In September 1905, Elder Booth returned to Tokat, this time with his wife Reba. Saim and his wife made them welcome. One night, Saim had a private talk with Elder Booth, and then, while Sister Booth distracted Saim's wife in the kitchen, the 2 men knelt by the cradle of Saim's youngest child, a daughter, and blessed her. Later that month, Elder and Sister Booth traveled to Constantinople, where they called on Saim's mother and siblings. Their hospitality was as great as Saim's. Sister Booth stayed overnight with the Turkish family. While in Constantinople, Elder Booth was able to secure copies of the Book of Mormon, published in Turkish and long held up at the customs office. Elder Booth sent a copy of the Book of Mormon to Saim on September 25th, 1905. And that, for now, is as far as I have been able to trace Saim Abd al-Samid, the pioneering Turkish Latter-day Saint. The details of Saim's story are unique to him, but on another level, his story is the same as countless other members of the church around the world who have, in the words of Elder Neil A. Maxwell, with quiet heroism made their way across the border into belief. In far too many cases, the stories of these quiet heroes are unknown to the church at large. Saim's name appears in no catalog and no index in either the Church History Library or the BYU Library. His story has not until recently been pulled together as a memorial to his courage. There are untold numbers of other Latter-day Saints whose stories are likewise scattered here and there in obscure records, waiting to be pulled together. And we can do it. We historians with the right frame of mind and the eyes to see what is before us on the records can pull together the traces someone has left on the records. And as Ezekiel saw in his vision of the valley of the dry bones, we can put bone back to bone and sinew to sinew and make these Latter-day Saints live again in our history and our memory to inspire us and keep us company on our own journey through this life. It takes persistence. I can't tell you how many thousands of pieces of paper I turned over in pursuit of Saim's story, but I can tell you that virtually all of what I have told you today was found within a single week's time once I knew there was a story to uncover. It takes creativity. So many of our records of church members in faraway places and long ago days lies in the records created by missionaries, as James has talked about. Sometimes it helps to have a touch of Alice. Just as she stepped through the looking glass, we historians have to read the record of a missionary knocking on a door and somehow step through the door to stand with the person who hears that knock and opens the door. It takes collaboration and cooperation. After searching so many records looking for the seemingly nameless Muslim convert of Aintab, I found him named in the diaries of Joseph W. Booth. But suddenly I had too many names. Was Saim Effendi the same as Saim Abd al-Samid, or had I conflated the stories of two different people? Needing help from an expert, I emailed Dan Peterson at BYU, and immediately came back the answer. Dan not only identified Saim as my man's personal name and Effendi as his title, but he also explained the origin and meaning of each part of Saim's name. It takes scholarship, too, to assemble the scattered pieces of a historical puzzle. But in this setting, I can say something I couldn't say in many scholarly gatherings. Along with the scholarship, it takes inspiration. Inspiration that often comes when we are pursuing the past for sacred reasons. I first alerted to Saim's story when I read Elder Mangum's letter asking for advice from the European Mission President. But because Saim was not named, and because I couldn't even tell from that letter whether he had ever actually been baptized or whether he had immigrated, I spent a lot of energy churning through documents without discovering anything. But a few days later, while working on a completely different story, I stumbled across a letter by President Anthony H. Lund telling a colleague about an immigration problem faced by the Scandinavian mission in September 1902. In the middle of his discussion of Scandinavian affairs, these lines jumped out at me. We had a very sad case of this occur with a Turkish saint, the only Mohammedan who has received the gospel, and it is as much as his life is worth if his relatives find out that he is a Mormon. He had weak eyes and was sent back to Turkey. That line, which I could not reasonably have found on my own had I been specifically hunting for it, told me that Saim had been baptized before reaching the United States, and it narrowed the time I would need to search to barely 1 year. That is the kind of spiritual boost to the hard work of scholarship that happens to me from time to time as I work on my assignments at the Church History Library. I believe it can happen to anyone who is working to serve the Lord and His church. A year ago, Saim Abd al-Samid was, quote, all unknown, to use the words of Elder Booth. Today, he is forgotten no more, but takes his place in the choir of Latter-day Saints who accepted the gospel for their own sake and whose stories can be told for our sake. Thank you for helping me remember and honor him today.